I first started composing when I was very young. I think I was about 8. It's probably the same time I started learning the piano. And really, composition has been a huge part of my life since then, and I've never really consciously decided to be a composer. It's just sort of the way it had to be. I think it's very difficult to learn how to be a composer. I think it's something that you do or you don't do. But if you do it, you can certainly develop your skills. And that can happen in a number of ways. You can study at a professional institution, which I did at the Royal Academy of Music, and also simply listening to other composers' music and looking at the scores and connecting the sounds you hear in your own head with the sounds that they made and how they wrote them down, and then hopefully making new sounds. Most of my inspiration comes from non-musical things, poetry and literature and painting and architecture, those sorts of things. And I always try and find parallels between music and other art forms, because I think it's easier to be inspired by something completely different. And also I worry that if I spend too much time being inspired by other people's music, I'll be tempted to just copy it. And I think it's useful to maintain a distance between your work and everybody else's. A live music sculpture is a new art form which combines space, physical space, with sound. And essentially the main idea is that because music is a time-based form, and sculpture and architecture are essentially space-based forms, that the music borrows some of that space from the architecture and the sculpture, and the building borrows some of the time from the music. And really, in the end, you find that the structure of the music is so dependent on the structure of the building that the sound and the music can't function anywhere else, and it has to be in that particular building. Well, my first live music sculpture was written for the Monument, and it was absolutely fascinating because it's essentially a giant column which behaves a bit like a giant clarinet or a giant bassoon or something like that. And I arranged the musicians in different alcoves which go up the spiral staircase. And the sound sort of emerged from these musicians and went all the way up, and at the very top it kind of combined in this beautiful ethereal sort of acoustic. And the second live music sculpture was written for the walkways of Tower Bridge. And actually the walkway is about the same length as the Monument, just tipped up the other way. And there we had 30 musicians on both sides all the way along. And that was very exciting because there was a real physical sense of the sound moving forwards and backwards. And because of the huge distance between the instruments at one end to the other, as you moved in a certain direction, the rhythm actually shifted as the sound jumped from one end to the other. My latest project was a huge piece for St. Paul's Cathedral called Live Music Sculpture 3, and it was based on the same principle as the other live music sculptures, which is that the musicians were arranged around the whole building, and we had them up in the Whispering Gallery and on other galleries all around at north, south, east and west, and also different heights. So some of them were 30 meters from the floor. And because the building has this huge 13-second echo, you can calculate how the sound's going to behave, but you can't really write it down. It's almost like the building itself becomes another instrument. I'm just about to start working on a new piece, which is for skateboarders, skate parks and choral singers in a choir. And the idea is that we tour this piece around the UK to 3 different skating locations, and we're in one of them now in London. And the idea is that I'm going to combine the percussive sounds of skateboarding and also the sort of dance-like gestures as they move around with choral singing, and also the acoustics of each skate park and the way the sound behaves as it bounces off all of these different concrete columns and blocks and that sort of thing. My advice for young composers and musicians is always have conviction in what you're doing and be as curious as you can be about the world around you and try and take in as much as you can. And finally, I guess, avoid doing the obvious and what everybody else has already done.